Good morning. I call this hearing to order. I want to thank everyone for joining us today in the Veterans Affairs Committee. Today's Economic Opportunity Subcommittee hearing will review the effectiveness of a critical, long-standing benefit for our nation's veterans, the VA Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program, or VR&E. Earlier this year, we had a chance during our budget hearing to begin asking some very important questions about this program's direction. And today we have a great opportunity to dig a little deeper. VR&E provides job training and other employment-related services to veterans with service-connected disabilities. Today we'll be reviewing the program's funding levels, staffing, administration, and the ongoing modernization of the administrative systems. I'd like to speak on that last item, the matter of technology modernization. I wasn't here last Congress when this committee learned about the major complications regarding case management modernization. But I know this committee was very critical then, about $12 million of lost investment. And I would associate myself with many of the remarks the committee made last year. We must be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. And I hope it'll be clear today that the VA has learned from what went wrong. Regarding the VR&E program myself, I am concerned about both the veteran participation rate and the number of quality counselors the VA is employing. We should be encouraging more veterans who are eligible to sign up for VR&E. But first, we must demonstrate strong results, which requires hiring more counselors. I'm grateful that the VA is making progress to bring the counselor-to-student ratio closer to the 1 to 125 ratio that we expect. But I am concerned that the program as a whole is suffering because that hasn't happened sooner. Second, I'd like to see the VA more actively promote VR&E services to our veterans. I know many of our witnesses agree with me on this point. For eligible veterans, VR&E should be a part of the transition process from the military. Finally, we must do a better job at making sure our veterans are receiving the very best advice from the very best counselors. This committee has heard from veterans who have either been misinformed by VR&E counselors and given advice that prioritized savings to the VA over the quality of education. Well, we must be prudent. We should not seek out savings at the expense of outcomes for our veterans. I look forward to hearing the testimony from our witnesses to determine where we should be focusing our efforts. On a different note, I'd also like to welcome Angela Disbrow, who is shadowing me today. She is a preschool teacher from Oceanside, California, my district, and she is with the National Foster Care Initiative for National Foster Care Month. Angela, thank you for joining us. And I know my friend Dr. Rowe, who's ranking member of the full Veterans Affairs Committee, is being shadowed as well. Dr. Rowe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce Alex Galindo. Alex is a freshman, or just finished his freshman year at the University of Tennessee, and he is majoring in microbiology and wants to be an orthopedic surgeon. I told Alex anybody can be a carpenter, but anyway, that's his choice, and we're really glad. I participated in this program since its inception, and these are some outstanding young people who've stepped up to represent a group of young people who are not very well represented, which are our foster kids. And it's a huge problem in this country. And it's great to see from Oceanside, California, a teacher and a future orthopedic surgeon who may fix my bum right knee in the future. We're very glad to have them here, and I want us to give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. I certainly share those sentiments and really appreciate the opportunity. And with that, I now would like to recognize my friend, Ranking Member Bill Arakis, for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. Today, the subcommittee will conduct an oversight hearing on the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program at the Department of Veterans Affairs. VR&E is a program designed to assist our severely wounded and disabled veterans by helping them find meaningful employment or reach maximum independent living, a most worthy cause. Every day, VR&E's master's level counselors work diligently with veterans in the program to help create a rehabilitation plan that fits their needs and to execute that plan. Counselors are also a constant source of support for the participant as they go through their individualized rehab program. I agree with those who have said that VR&E program should be the crown jewel of benefits provided through the Veterans Benefits Administration. It's certainly needed. This program is more than just a benefits program. It's also a vital first step for disabled veterans to become more financially independent, which is a win-win for veterans and, of course, taxpayers alike. For years, this subcommittee has continued to sound the alarm about the rising caseloads for VR&E counselors and the impact these caseloads were having on employee morale and services provided to veterans. I'm pleased to see that after many years of advocacy by this subcommittee and veteran service organizations, VA has begun the hard work of hiring additional counselors to reduce caseloads to the recommended 1 to 125 counselor to veteran ratio. I want to thank the VBA team for addressing this issue that was seemingly falling on deaf ears. Thanks so very much for doing this. It's so important. Another topic that seems to be falling on deaf ears is oversight of the new case management system for tracking VR&E participants. This system was supposed to finally eliminate participants' paper-based files that can be lost or damaged and hamper counselor efficiency. After years of waiting, in 2015, VR&E was given the green light to begin working with VA information technology staff on a replacement for the current case management program that has been in place since 1997. After almost 3 years of work, 8 different IT builds, hundreds of man-hours, sound familiar, and $12 million, VA ended up with a system that didn't work. Unacceptable. We have been told that none of the code created is salvageable, and the only thing VA was able to get out of this work were lessons learned for the next time. This was the main topic of discussion at our oversight hearing on VR&E last year, which outlined problems, of course the chairman alluded to this, facing VA with the creation of this new case management system. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that this incident and the challenges faced with the Forever GI Bill implementation last fall highlight challenges VBA leaders have had in getting the attention of the VA Office of Information and Technology. To the best of my knowledge, no one associated with the development of either of these IT systems has been held accountable. Not one. Unacceptable again. It begs the question of how many veterans would have been better served if this $12 million program had been better, the money had been better spent. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm encouraged by the recent investments in VR&E programs, including the promise of a new case management system in fiscal year 2021. I'm also encouraged by the suite of new tools that are being developed and have the potential to greatly assist VR&E counselors with their day-to-day operations. However, it is Congress's job to ask the tough questions about how these new systems and processes will improve the experience and outcomes for disabled veterans, not just make things easier for VA employees. Again, that's the key. I mean, we're trying to help our veterans, so we need more production to serve more veterans. Finally, I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses how we can improve consistency of services and decisions being made by VR&E counselors across the country. I'd also like to receive recommendations on how to improve and track long-term outcomes of VR&E participants. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses. Folks, it's got to work. I mean, this is a great program. It's a wonderful idea, great concept, but it's got to work for our veterans, and that's what we're going to make sure happens. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bilirakis. I certainly share your sentiments. On our first panel, we're joined by Mr. William Streitberger, Director of the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Service at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Thanks for joining us. As you know, you'll have 5 minutes, but your full statement will be added to the record. Director Streitberger, you're now recognized to present your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Bilirakis, Ranking Member Rowe, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the VR&E program. I am deeply honored and privileged to be here not only as the Executive Director, but as a proud recipient of this benefit and alumnus. I would not be in this role today had it not been for this tremendous contribution this program has had on my life. Today, I'm excited to share with you VR&E's historic modernization efforts to provide participants with the benefits that they've earned in a manner that honors their service. The mission of VR&E is to provide service members and veterans to prepare for, find, and maintain employment. Services fall under one of 5 tracks. 96% of our participants are in the long-term services track, which includes all payment of training and other required resources. Currently, more than 1,000 professional VRCs deliver services through a network of over 350 locations. VR&E works with OFO to provide oversight, guidance, communication, and advice to the field. As Executive Director, I am heavily involved in all aspects of program operations. Since my arrival, I've instituted a comprehensive change management strategy to support the modernization effort. I have traveled the country conducting town halls to share my vision and engage in discussions on key topics of concern and interest. There are currently 3 significant initiatives underway to strengthen program oversight and compliance. First, VACO will expand program oversight and compliance, and will expand that by 3-fold. Our new model will ensure compliance at each regional office every fiscal year. Second, our QA transformation will increase effectiveness and efficiency of the program, enabling us to get a more accurate picture of VR&E performance. And third, technology will increase our capability to monitor operations, enforce compliance, drive higher quality, and eliminate inconsistencies. In FY18, VR&E serviced nearly 16,000 veterans to achieve a positive outcome, an increase of 3% from FY17. VR&E has implemented a new growth metric which measures the percentage of veterans entitled to our program that actually enter a plan of service. This will help us focus on increasing participants in the program. We continue to collaborate with DoD to offer services to active duty, reserve, and National Guard through the IDES program, providing early intervention counseling and other services to wounded, ill, and injured service members. Further, we support transitioning service members, veterans, and family members through Chapter 36, including adjustment counseling, vocational testing, education, and career advice. We consistently hear veterans say that they do not remember hearing about VR&E in TAP. We will improve the TAP curriculum to add time based on the 2018 NDAA legislation. We continue to track veteran cohorts in the congressionally mandated 20-year longitudinal study. Nearly 90% of participants reported moderate to high satisfaction with the program, and around 90% of veterans achieving rehabilitation from an employment plan were employed last year. Those who complete the program report positive economic outcomes, including higher employment rates, months worked, annual earnings, and home ownership, as compared to those who discontinued from the program. VR&E has embarked on a comprehensive modernization effort to improve customer service by streamlining processes and modernizing our systems. We have developed an overarching plan to include implementation of a new case management solution, again, after 2 years floundering in my own educational pursuits. So I think we have a lot of that we have yet to work with, and I'm really eager to dig in with my team and find out how we can communicate this program differently so that veterans see the value in having the wraparound services that we
Yeah, I
provide.
think it's so very important, and I appreciate that. Anything we can do to help. I have one more question, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm pleased to hear about the new technology and game changers that are going to put in place, that we're going to put in place for the VR&E counselors. What type of improvement should we expect to see in demonstrable outcome measures for VR&E participants once these new tools are implemented?
Thank
You
you,
probably
sir.
kind of touched on it, but
Yeah.
if you could elaborate, I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and that's the exciting part about what we're doing. And our team back at headquarters, we're involved in this process every day, looking at how are we going to measure the success of the implementation of this technology. And quite frankly, the bottom line solution, the bottom line outcome is going to be how we're able to create more capacity for counselors to provide direct-facing services to veterans each and every day. How much more time can they spend sitting across from them, from their desk, and dealing with their issues and providing them with guidance and concern, or referrals to our partners in the community, at VHA and other places, to ensure that everything that they need to be successful is taking place in their plan of service. When they're overworked and they're spending most of their time doing administrative tasks, they can't get to all of their veterans on their caseload to provide that service. And I'm working each and every day tirelessly to ensure that these technology initiatives eliminate or eradicate to the greatest extent possible that burden that they have currently that is not providing service to veterans in a manner that they deserve to be served.
Very good, sir. Mr. Streiberger, I think you have some great ideas, and again, we're looking forward to working with you on this because it's so important. Thank you very much. I yield back,
Thank you,
Mr.
Ranking
Chairman.
Member.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I'd now like to recognize Ms. Rice for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, last year, the VA assigned a Vet Success on Campus VSOC counselor to be shared between 2 schools in my district, Nassau and, well, one of them, Nassau, is in my district, and then the Suffolk Community College. Both are on Long Island. So I can't even tell you how much of a game changer that was. I mean, the VSOC counselors are such a valuable resource for student veterans. They provide benefits, assistance, support services during the transition from military to college life. And I, as well as everyone on this committee, has advocated for an expansion of that program because not every school, not every district, schools and districts across the country are as lucky as we were to get a VSOC. So does the VA plan to continue expanding the program, and what challenges are you currently facing in terms of the VA's ability to meet the demand for placements of VSOC counselors on additional college campuses?
Thank you for your question, ma'am, and I could not agree with you more on the value of the VSOC program. We are extremely interested in expanding the program. I've asked for 7 additional FTE in the 2020 budget, but that's clearly not enough. I have over 225 institutions of higher learning clamoring to get the same resources, and I'm currently only authorized 145 FTE to fill those slots. So the current representation at 70 installations around the country represents, the 83 that I have authorized. So we would need to expand the authorization of FTE to fill any additional VSOC roles.
So can you just go back to something that you were talking about when you said 66% of the people who leave, who don't access the services anymore? There were 2 specific reasons you said for that?
So in our estimation, from what we've heard from veterans, they've either come to an orientation after they've filed an application for our program and determined upon hearing about what VR&E is all about, which is employment and not education. Education being a component of how they achieve a positive outcome to become suitably employed, and then the others not wanting to participate in a rigorous process of achieving their employment goal, which might be through education or training, where they have to engage on a very frequent basis with their counselor to provide oversight and other program services.
So when is the first time that a service member has contact with you,
So
or your program?
a service member can have contact with our program during 6 months prior to their discharge through our VSOC program on campus. They can have engagement with us through our Integrated Disability Evaluation System programs at our military installations when they're transitioning out as wounded, ill, or injured. And they typically come to us after they've separated from the service, have applied for the benefit, and attended a orientation program at one of our 56 regional offices or 142 out-based offices.
So what percentage of your program attendees are you connecting with before they officially separate?
That question I'd have to take for the record.
Can you, because it seems to me that there has to be earlier engagement in order to maximize the use of this program and helping the people who are intending to help.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
if you could get that information, that would be great.
I would be happy to do so.
Thank you very much. I
Yes,
yield
ma'am.
back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. I now recognize the ranking member of our Veterans Affairs Committee, Dr. Rowe, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. And I just have a very few questions, but we have 7.5 million unfilled jobs in the country right now, and the unemployment rate among our veteran population, which is great, is 1.7%. That's the lowest I ever remember. But the question I have, I guess, for you is how large is your budget? How much and how many people do you serve? And how do you measure success? In other words, a year after you finish the program, every organization ought to have a metric or a way to say we were successful in what we did. And about how much money do you invest per participant in this counseling process?
Thank you for your question, sir. Regarding how much money we actually spend.
What is your budget?
So in 2018, the budget for the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program was $1.3 billion.
Okay.
About $250 million of that was for discretionary funding to administer the program. So in terms of understanding the success rate, first of all, I'd like to say how we view success is by the outcome of what the veteran experience is. And I think of an Air Force veteran that recently was in our program for just about 5.5 years who had struggled severely with alcoholism, joblessness, critical medical issues, and the suicide of his wife, who left him as a single father to his 13-year-old son, and how after 5.5 years in our program, he is now today a vocational rehabilitation counselor working in the Department of Veterans Affairs. He's happily remarried due to the adjustment counseling he received from our program, and he's a proud homeowner. That's how we determine success.
But I mean, not to interrupt you, but at the end of, you have, how many, you said 110,000 veterans
right now,
in
we
this
have
program?
115,000 in the program.
Actively in the program?
Yes, sir.
So it would look to me like that maybe 12 months or 24 months or 36 months later, because the whole idea of this is to get into, you've been injured, but to get into a gainful employment that you can take care of your family and raise your family and earn an income. Am I correct?
That is correct, sir.
Well, then we ought to know at 12 months or 24 or 36 or 5 years, are we actually doing that?
Yes.
And if we're not, then we probably ought to change how we're doing it.
Absolutely. And so participants in our program spend roughly 5 to 6 years on average in the program. And so we track them through the continuum of the program to ensure that they are on track and that they're meeting their particular individual program requirements. Determining success for each individual veteran is based on what in fact their program of service is. Is it a short-term training program, and can we measure that over a period of 6 months? Or is it a education program that includes a 4-year degree program and then subsequent employment services post-education to get them ready?
Well, again, not to quote Yogi Berra, but if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. And so you ought to have some goals out there, and have we met those metrics for these veterans?
Yes.
And been successful? And I think if we are, that's great, because I'm a huge supporter of Voc Rehab. We used it in Tennessee on the non-military side very successfully to retrain people and get them back in the workforce. And that's the whole purpose of this.
Absolutely.
The question is, are we doing it?
We are, sir, and last year, as I mentioned, we rehabilitated almost 16,000 veterans in our program of service, which is 3% higher over the last year, and we're on track to do even more this year, which is the ultimate determination of success of our program, is to achieve our stated program targets and outcomes.
And are your numbers, and I missed that, are your numbers stable or going up or down? And again, not knowing about the program, obviously veterans can't access it.
Yes, so great question, sir. Our program outcomes have increased over the last 3 years, but our participation has dropped over the last 2 years. So as I mentioned in my opening statement, we've instituted a growth metric, a driving metrics that will point attention to our counselors to actually work with veterans to ensure that they get into a program of service so we can have more folks in the program, we can sustain them throughout the program, and can continue to have high levels of positive outcomes, which means veterans are being employed and supporting their livelihood.
And my time is very short, and I think you've answered this, but of the 15,000 or so veterans that discontinued, I think you've mentioned that you may have gotten in there and this program just not right for me. Is
Correct,
that,
sir.
Okay,
That
I
is
yield back,
absolutely
Mr.
correct.
Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Rowe. I'd now like to recognize Congressman Pappas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the ranking member and Mr. Straitberger. Great to be with you here today. Just following up, wanted to draw on the VA's annual performance plan and looking at the class achievement rates contained within there. I noticed that 2018 had an achievement rate of 72%. It fell to 65% in 2018. There's a strategic target of 68%, as you well know. I'm wondering if you could comment on those numbers and what needs to be done to get them moving back in the right direction.
Thank you for that great question. I'm very excited to tell the subcommittee that within VR&E service, we're working on new measures, what I call measuring the middle. We do a really good job, sir, up front of measuring how the timeliness of getting folks into a program of service, their average days to entitlement, their average days to evaluation and planning. And then on the back end of the program, we measure the timeliness of their employment services and then their positive outcome targets. But within the middle, where they persist in our program, we evaluate a lot of the activities that our hardworking counselors do each and every day to support a veteran in persisting in the program in our qualitative measures. We are currently working right now with a work group of folks from around the country to look at what do we do in the middle? What are those key activities that we must do and elevate them to our performance standard levels so that all employees are focused on ensuring that the activities they do each and every day are ensuring a veteran is successful in persisting in their program so that they can have the positive outcome that they worked for from the beginning.
Can you talk about the timeliness and the entitlement determination of a 45-day goal, how that target was arrived at, and whether you're going to look to narrow that in the future?
So with our new technology implementation, we are going to look very closely at how that shrinks our timeliness in many of these processes. One of the things that's really important to point out about finding someone entitled or developing a plan of service is that each plan of service or each program of service is very uniquely individual to every individual veteran. And it's at that point, in many instances, we turn this process back to the veteran to go out and do vocational exploration with our DOL Vets partners, to do research on the types of schools and programs that they want to do. Is that education program viable, and will it ultimately result in employment in the geographical location where they reside? So the timeliness there, we'd like to, of course, streamline that to the extent that we possibly can, but it's also there to ensure that the veteran has explored his or her option to be successful in the program more fully.
Would you be able to set a specific target in the future, or is that TBD?
Well, I think it's TBD, and I'll tell you why. We're in a change management process where we've unfrozen all of what we've been doing in the past, and we're implementing new people, process, and technology initiatives. And as we lay them down between now and the first quarter of FY 2021, there's going to be a lot of change, and our ability to firmly understand what it is we're going to be able to measure and the benefits that we'll achieve through the modernization and technology initiatives in particular, I think is TBD until we refreeze and we have our new process in place, and that we can evaluate what is happening across the value stream of the program of services that we provide to our veterans.
One final area I wanted to address, the Video Connect program.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of potential here, especially for vets from a district like mine who are in rural communities, not adjacent to services. This will allow them to virtually see telecounselors. And I'm wondering, how equipped our veterans are to be able to take advantage of that technology, if there are some on the other side of the digital divide that won't be able to because of lack of access to broadband or the technology they need.
Absolutely. Great question. One of the things that I'm most excited about, we've heard from our employees in the field about their veteran participants who have not been able to come in to have a face-to-face appointment for various reasons: distance, time, money, their inability to get off work and the like. So this new platform that we actually launched in November of last year is one of the easiest platforms to run this technology on. It's the Cisco Pexip platform. It can be used on any mobile device that has a camera and a microphone. So on your iPad, your iPod, your whatever, you can access this technology and have an appointment with your counselor.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. I now recognize Mr. Muser for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. Looking at your background and extensive experience, I can see clearly you're virtually the ideal person to be the director of this important area for the Department of Veteran Affairs and for our veterans. So I want to run through some questions for you relatively quickly. The system, the integrated system that we're getting into now, are you confident in its development and the progress being made?
Thank you for your question, sir, and thank you for your confidence in me. I greatly appreciate that. I would say with 100% certainty that I'm confident that we will deploy the system in the first quarter of 2021, and we will implement components of it as they become available after its acquisition at the end of this fiscal year. And I will tell you that there's never been more oversight of this implementation than we currently have right now. I am partnering with executives at my level in our Office of Business Process Integration with OI&T, and we've actually added another layer in that process to ensure that we successfully acquire and start deploying the system. Our acquisitions executive leadership is in our scrums on a weekly basis to ensure that we are hitting all the targets of our critical path along our integrated master schedule. There is no daylight between our engagement among those entities to ensure that we are successful for the veterans that deserve to be served in this manner.
In my district, Pennsylvania's 9th, do you know of the employers, for instance, that often hire veterans, and or is that on a list, and do you do your best to match those to the veterans that live in the district?
Absolutely, sir. I personally could not name them one by one, but
Sure.
our employment coordinators who are deployed in our regional offices and many of our vocational rehabilitation counselors who deal heavily with our employers, we have those employers listed. We're engaging with them out in the community. We're offering them the additional services that we provide to employers to help ensure that veterans are successful when they do become employed with those employers.
Now, they don't operate out of the VAs?
They do.
They do?
Yes,
Okay, thank
they
you.
do.
Do you then, if the skills aren't there, do you match them up as well with various vocational schools and career development centers?
Absolutely. So we assess their program needs. We determine their interest, aptitudes, and ability. We write a plan of services for them based on their career goals, and then we match them with institutions of higher learning, training facilities. We also do on-the-job training programs, non-paid work experience programs, and the like to ensure that they're fully prepared to be successful when they engage with that employer.
Okay. How about transportation? When that becomes an issue where a veteran who has the ability to do the job just can't get to the job?
So those are pressing issues that we are working very closely on with our DOL Vets partnership. We have a work group where we're working with community partners through our CVEBs and other community partnerships to help us bridge the gap where transportation is concerned. It is a pressing issue that some of our program participants face, and we know we have to address that issue.
How's the volunteer initiative going for that? Is it strong? Is it good? Are there people stepping up to volunteer to provide transportation for veterans?
So specific to the VR&E program, we don't participate in that. However, if we do have veterans who are coming to our co-located regional offices with a hospital, they often participate in transportation services, such as the DAV, transportation services and the like.
Sure.
But where it concerns them actually getting to work from their home and the like, we're still dealing with those issues.
Yeah, that is difficult. There are, I think, about 16 states that offer tax credits to employers for hiring veterans. Do those tax credits create the right incentive, in your opinion?
I do. And our employment coordinators or vocational rehabilitation counselors work with the employers to inform them. We also have special employer incentives to incentivize employers to hire veterans that may need some more on-the-job experience and training before they're somewhat at the journeyman or woman level. So we work with them to inform them about those as well. In addition to any workplace adjustments or reasonable accommodations the veteran might need to be successful in that role, we can support those requests with the employers as well.
Any data you have on that perhaps we could share within Pennsylvania or any state for that matter would be helpful.
It'd be my pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Muser. I now recognize Mr. Cunningham for 5 minutes.
I just want to thank you for your service and being here today. And I would yield back to the chair and save my time for the second panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. And thank you, Director Streitberger. I really appreciate your testimony and your work on behalf of veterans and your service yourself. Thank you so much for all that you do. I'd now like to call on our second panel to join us. All right. Everybody ready? Record time. Appearing before us today is Mr. Patrick Murray, Deputy Director for the National Legislative Service at the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States. Good to see you again. Also here is Mr. Derek Franeberger, who serves as Director of Legislative Affairs for the Wounded Warrior Project. Thanks for being here. We also have Mr. Jeremy Villanueva, Assistant National Legislative Director for the Disabled American Veterans. Next is Mr. Stephen Henry, the Associate Legislative Director for the Paralyzed Veterans of America. Finally, Ms. Tanya Eng, Vice President at Veterans Education Success. Good to see you all again, and thanks for joining us. As you know, you'll have 5 minutes, but your full statement will be added to the record. With that, Mr. Murray, you're now recognized to present your opening statement.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Bill Arakis, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the men and women of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliary, thank you for the opportunity to present our views on this important program today. Making sure that veterans remain employed in the right career for every one of them is incredibly important. One vital program veterans can use is the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program, commonly referred to as Voc Rehab. This program provides critical counseling and other adjunct services necessary to enable service-disabled veterans to overcome barriers as they prepare for, find, and maintain gainful employment. Ensuring veterans achieve meaningful and prosperous careers will improve their financial situations, thereby mitigating issues such as unemployment and homelessness. VA budget documents state the Voc Rehab program will meet and sustain the congressionally mandated goal of 1 to 125 client to counselor ratio. However, the latest data in VA's budget documents also shows that from 2016 to 2018, the number of voc rehab participants dropped by more than 5%. There was also a caseload reduction of 8.4%. It would appear VA is able to meet the 1 to 125 goal by having fewer veterans to serve. VA has hired additional counselors, which brought them within the mandated ratio, and have made substantial technological upgrades within the past year. VA also predicts that some of these changes will increase participation within the voc rehab program. If that does in fact happen and participation increases, then VA will again be outside the 1 to 125 ratio. Now is the time to be planning for the additional resources or employees needed to accommodate the increase in clients and not wait until after the fact. This is an opportunity for VA to get ahead of an issue instead of waiting until the problem arises. While the number of counselors is something to always keep an eye on, the consistency of granting approval for this program is important as well. A consistent complaint from our members is they're unaware of the voc rehab program and just exactly who's eligible for it. A lot of disinformation is spread by word of mouth, and there's a lot of confusion about eligibility and exactly how the program can be used. Some veterans are approved to use voc rehab to attain advanced degrees, and others are denied the same opportunity. The flexibility of voc rehab is one of the best parts of the program, but not having standardized usages leads to a lot of confusion and resentment towards VA. The VFW recommends a more robust discussion of the program within TAP classes, which we believe would help mitigate some of the confusion surrounding voc rehab and may guide more veterans to using it if there's better information presented earlier. While voc rehab is an employment program, it is commonly used for training on college campuses. The processing of voc rehab claims to universities is where we hear a lot of voc rehab problems. The processing of Chapter 31 claims take months to go through the system, leaving some universities without payment for multiple semesters. In some cases, students are not allowed to further enroll until payments are made. And in others, students are being counseled to voluntarily not enroll until the delayed payments are made. The delays in processing voc rehab payments are negatively affecting users of the program, and this program needs to be rectified, this problem needs to be rectified immediately. Lastly, for years, the VFW has called upon Congress to make voc rehab available for life. The 12-year limit on utilizing voc rehab is detrimental to older veterans who might be seeking to remain current with the evolving job market or a change in employment needs due to a service-connected disability received years ago. Recently, the Forever part of the Forever GI Bill was implemented because we recognize the importance of education throughout veterans' lives. Employment and training opportunities are just as important throughout all stages of their lives. We fully understand that counselors have the ability to waive the 12-year requirement and are told they often do so. However, the issue we've heard from our members isn't that they're being denied, but instead they aren't even applying because the requirements say they aren't eligible. Removing this barrier for applying would help veterans at any point in their lives to utilize this great program, and that's why we support H.R. 444 to remove this limit. Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Bilirakis, thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. This concludes my remarks, and I'm prepared to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Frunenberger, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Bilirakis, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity. Wounded Warrior Project is pleased to discuss our thoughts regarding the Veteran Affairs Vocational Rehabilitation Employment Program, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. Wounded Warrior Project has more than a dozen direct programs which we offer to wounded, ill, and injured service members and veterans to help with their physical and mental challenges. One of these programs informing our perspective for this morning's hearing is known as Warriors to Work. This program assists WWP alumni in searching for jobs with an emphasis on helping at transition. We provide a range of services designed to meet veterans wherever they are in their job-seeking process. We assist warriors with resume building, job placement, interview skills, and military occupational skill translation. While we can connect veterans to all of our programs no matter where they live, Warriors to Work is one of the only 3 programs where we have dedicated staff in each of our locations and field offices because it helps us meet such a critical need. We realize education and vocational training are key tools for this population of warrior, and in addition to the proof of our programming, we have specific data to illustrate that point. Perhaps most telling is that our annual survey reflects that 27% of our warriors who reported currently enrolled in school reported doing so through the VR&E program. Over 95% of the more than 33,000 warriors who responded to our survey stated that they have a disability rating over 20%. And regardless of disability rating, we know that a fulfilling career after service is critical to overall well-being. In this context, we are pleased with the current VR&E information technology improvements, specifically the virtual assistance and telecounseling changes. The virtual assistant will support scheduling appointments via text message, email, and other platforms. We hope that this new tool will allow vocational rehabilitation counselors more time to work with the veteran and lower the rate of scheduling complications. Additionally, VR&E will be introducing a telecounseling ability using VA's Video Connect software. It can be difficult for veterans to drive to a local office due to time constraints or location. We hope using telecounseling will drastically reduce no-shows and allow counselors more time to interact with veterans. We have a few recommendations regarding the VR&E program, which is outlined in more detail in our written testimony. However, we would like to highlight 3 issue areas for this committee's consideration. First, WWP recommends aligning the Chapter 31 monthly living stipend with Chapter 33. We have seen instances where veterans would benefit more from VR&E services opt into Chapter 33 post-9/11 GI Bill solely for the monthly living allotment. By matching Chapter 31's living stipend to Chapter 33, veterans can choose the program that is best for their future and not what pays most in living stipend presently. Second, we recommend updating the program's name. The term rehabilitation had a different meaning in 1918 when the program was adopted. At this time, rehabilitation meant the restoration of someone into a useful place of society. Today, that same dictionary defines rehabilitation as rehabilitating someone who is a criminal or needs drug or alcohol assistance. Because of the connotations behind the word rehabilitation or rehab, voc rehab, we recommend VA look at alternative language that is more appropriate in today's world. It would be unfortunate if a veteran overlooked this program due to confusion regarding the term rehabilitation. Lastly, we recommend that VR&E self-employment track is revamped to promote more usage among the veteran population. The VR&E self-employment track is for veterans who have limited access to traditional employment and might need a flexible work environment to accommodate disabilities. It empowers veterans to enter into entrepreneurship roles. In this program, veterans receive assistance to start their own business, to include access to startup funds. And as you know, access to capital is considered one of the biggest barriers of entry for starting a small business. Wounded Warrior Project's mission not only assists veterans with disabilities, but allows them to live the most productive lives possible. Many times this means connecting them with meaningful employment. We would like to thank the committee for their time today and look forward for any questions you may have regarding our oral or written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frontenbarger. Mr. Villanueva, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Bill Rackus, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting DAV to testify at this oversight hearing to discuss the program management, outcomes, effectiveness, and needs of VR&E. I testify before you today not just as an advocate for disabled veterans, but also as a successful outcome of VR&E. As a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, I had utilized my educational benefits under the post-9/11 GI Bill and attained a bachelor's degree at Cal State Bakersfield in 2013. However, due in part to my disabilities, I could not obtain gainful employment. When I was hired by DAV in 2014, I was enrolled in VR&E, provided a vocational plan that took into consideration my service-connected conditions, and assisted in my first 16 months of employment as a National Service Officer, where I personally helped veterans with their VA claims to include VR&E benefits. I completed NSO training in 2015 and began a series of promotions that led me to DAV's legislative staff. This is one example of how VR&E can help a veteran find the path to economic success that is best suited for the individual. VR&E reported in 2017 that approximately 90% of veterans who have achieved rehabilitation were employed in the past year, and that the rate of homeownership was higher than the general population of the United States. Combine this with reported income that are at least $18,000 higher than for those who discontinued the program, and VR&E is proving to be a valuable resource to America's disabled veteran. But there are some areas to improve upon, and despite data showing how beneficial VR&E can be, participation rates are down. VA's budget request shows that it will meet the 1 to 125 counselor to veteran ratio. However, the latest data in the VA budget document shows that from 2016 to 2018, The number of VR&E participants fell by 5%, and caseload declined by 8.4%, which raised some questions. Is VR&E able to meet this goal by serving fewer veterans? Has VR&E instituted any new policies or practices that have deterred disabled veterans from seeking these services? And what action is VA taking to increase awareness of the availability and benefits of VR&E services? We are concerned that VA's hiring of new counselors to strengthen the program and increase services to disabled veterans is being negated by utilizing these counselors to do administrative tasks. While the request for 70 additional FTE is encouraging, the total FTE will only be raised by 4. So where will the additional 70 counselors come from? VA noted in its assessment of the teleconferencing pilot program that VRCs who participated in the pilot had to assume duties that were generally completed by support staff, like the scheduling of appointments, monitoring of attendance, sending 10-day letters, etc. Increasing counselors but losing other essential staff undercuts the benefit of achieving the 125-to-1 ratio. Mr. Chairman, VR&E has improved the lives of thousands of disabled veterans, yet rural and economically disadvantaged veterans continue to have barriers to access these benefits. This past March, VR&E expanded telecounseling services nationwide to over 1,000 counselors. We are encouraged that VR&E has taken steps to reduce travel times to both veterans and VRCs alike, facilitate better case management, and help veterans to obtain their benefits more efficiently. It should be noted, though, that this program should remain an option for veterans and not standard protocol. In addition, VR&E suffers from a lack of resources and funding, an issue we believe to be due in part to a lack of leadership whose entire focus is on the economic opportunity programs. DAV is extremely pleased that the House passed a bill that would create a new fourth administration in the VA, but we need to work together to ensure that it makes it through the Senate during this Congress. In order to further strengthen VA's education, economic opportunities, and transition programs, to include VR&E, DAV supports the creation of this fourth administration, which would be made up of the VBA programs currently under the purview of the Office of Economic Opportunity. This new administration would include critical programs such as VR&E, the GI Bill, and TAP for transition servicing veterans. For VR&E to fully reach its potential, it needs a leadership structure whose success rests solely on the success of the economic opportunity programs. The creation of this fourth administration would provide a greater accountability to Congress when problems such as low participation rates and the misallocation of resources come to light. In addition, by having an undersecretary who is held accountable for the actions of VR&E and other EO programs, greater oversight can be accomplished and results improved. Mr. Chairman, VR&E has shown time and time again that it is a useful resource for service-disabled veterans who are looking to utilize their given skills and talents to improve their quality of life. We look forward to working with this subcommittee to make sure that VR&E continues to ease and expand access to this important resource for America's disabled veterans. This concludes my testimony on behalf of DAV. I would be happy to answer any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Villanueva. Mr. Henry, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Barakis, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Paralyzed Veterans of America appreciates this opportunity to testify before the subcommittee about the effectiveness of the Department of Veterans Affairs Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Programs, VR&E. We often hear how great and beneficial VR&E is, but the number of veterans eligible for the benefit compared to those who use it suggests there's a clear lack of communication and outreach to all eligible veterans. In FY 2018, roughly 4.75 million veterans had service-connected disabilities, but less than 3% of them utilized VR&E services. If you were to ask the average veteran about VA benefits, most could explain key elements of the disability compensation program, but very few know basic facts about VR&E. PVA believes that the effectiveness of VA's VR&E programs could be greatly improved through a number of changes that include greater outreach to veterans to raise awareness about the benefit, continued collaboration with outside agencies and programs, and increased follow-up time with participants. PVA has found that VR&E usage throughout our membership is rather low. We do not believe this is due to a lack of interest, but rather a lack of understanding of how the program works. One PVA member recently noted that he learned about the program only after he had returned to the workforce following his injury. Another was vaguely aware of the program, but thought he was no longer eligible even though he actually retained eligibility. These are common occurrences, and it's possible that the program is being overshadowed by the Forever GI Bill, which is widely advertised through a multitude of venues. A veteran's eligibility period for receiving services from VR&E is for 12 years beginning on either 1, the date of separation from military service, or 2, the date the veteran receives a VA disability rating. To receive services, a veteran must need vocational rehabilitation to overcome employment barriers due to a service-connected disability. For veterans who have incurred a catastrophic disability, the 12-year delimiting date may not be sufficient to allow them to meet their vocational rehabilitation goals. Furthermore, many of these veterans have disabilities that may continue to evolve and worsen over time, which may cause them to need additional assistance. Although a VR&E counselor may waive the 12-year limit for veterans with serious employment barriers, veterans living with the wounds, injuries, and illnesses associated with military service should have certainty that if they need assistance in staying in or returning to the workforce in the future, that this program will be there to assist them. As a result of the barriers to employment faced by our members, PVA launched its own Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program in 2007, Paving Access for Veterans Employment, or PAVE. PAVE serves all veterans nationwide using a hybrid integrated approach to assist veterans and transitioning service members who face significant barriers to employment, as well as their spouses and caregivers. Collaborating with public and private partners is an important way to ensure that veterans with disabilities will be able to receive the services and supports needed to allow them to build successful employment outcomes. VR&E must continue to do community outreach to find experienced, credible partners to meet gaps that will result in more veterans with disabilities being placed in competitive, integrated employment sooner. VR&E counselors typically follow veterans for 60 days once they are placed in a job. PVA believes that, at the very least, VR&E should study whether or not the current tracking standard of 60 days is sufficient follow-up time. For employees with probationary periods over 60 days, longer follow-up time may allow for problems that could lead to dismissal to be addressed, resulting in the veteran remaining employed. Regardless of the length of a probationary period, if any, it makes sense to increase the follow-up time to ensure that the veteran has the support, if needed, to ensure a successful transition to the workforce. That's why our PAVE counselors conduct ongoing follow-up for our veterans placed through our program. Long-term support may be needed to help a veteran with a catastrophic disability to not only successfully transition back to the workforce, but also to remain in the workforce. In conclusion, without the proper services and supports, veterans with catastrophic disabilities are in danger of falling out of the workforce permanently. Such a loss means decreased financial security and social opportunities. VA's VR&E program provides critical access to needed services and supports for veterans with service-connected disabilities. An investment in VR&E is an investment in helping veterans with disabilities return to work and ensuring their long-time rehabilitation and success. PVA thanks the subcommittee for the opportunity to express our views, and I welcome any follow-up questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Finally, Ms. Eng, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Bilirakis, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. At Veterans Education Success, we work to advance higher education success for military-affiliated students. We believe holistic support and access to high-quality post-secondary education and training for workforce development increases vocational opportunities for those who have served our country. VR&E is a crucial program that does just this, as it provides support for veterans and service members with service-connected disabilities through individualized plans that help them prepare for, obtain, and maintain suitable employment. I would like to bring to the committee's attention the following 3 areas that deserve attention: technology, ways to improve the role of vocational rehabilitation counselors, and the need for parity. First, technology. The last time the case management system for VR&E was updated was in 1997. Complaints from school administrators around the country have revolved around the challenges certifying officials face with what one administrator referred to as the black hole of certification. Student veterans have gone up to 6 months without receiving payments, causing undue financial hardship. When SCOs contact regional offices for updates, they are left with little information and much frustration as they work to find ways to provide answers and support for their students, veterans struggling to stay in school. VBA has proactively made this issue a priority over the last year, and based on recent conversations we have had with the VR&E office, we remain cautiously optimistic. With recent challenges VA OINT has experienced with its last attempt to modernize the current system and the recent rollout of sections of the Harry W. Colmary Act, we urge careful consideration and oversight from Congress. Second, veteran resource counselors. We applaud VBA's concerted effort to reduce the number of clients per counselor, but question the current legislative mandate of 125 clients to one counselor. The program offers individualized support specific to the needs and challenges of each client. This type of support is necessary, yet the time it takes to provide such support and follow-up can be labor-intensive. We encourage the committee to further explore whether the current client-to-counselor ratio is realistic and consider decreasing the congressionally mandated ratio. We are also concerned about the recent news of James King, a VR&E counselor who pleaded guilty to bribery, fraud, and obstruction for demanding and receiving bribes from 3 for-profit schools in exchange for steering veterans to those schools. While this example is clearly egregious in nature, it is important to ensure counselors are not in positions where significant conflicts of interest exist. It also highlights the power and influence current legislation gives to counselors. I have supported a number of students who were admitted into top-tier universities, as well as low-quality schools that did not produce the same vocational outcomes. Because the lower-quality school accepted 1 credit of physical education from the student's joint services transcript, the counselor only approved the individual to choose the lower-quality school because it would be more cost-effective. Not all colleges are created equal. A veteran's career and earnings trajectory are significantly enhanced by attending a college that offers high quality and better respect in the high quality education and better respect in the job market. Consistency in guidelines and expectations for counselors is important, as is ongoing training and allowing veterans a more prominent voice in the institution or program of study they choose to pursue. We encourage the committee to institute higher benchmarks counselors should consider for a program's quality, including considering college outcome metrics using readily available federal data. In a Government Accountability Office report, veterans cited challenges with their counselors' inability to help them translate their military service into federal civilian employment, and frustration that a counselor did not adequately describe the physical challenges of the job given the veteran's service-connected disabilities. Veterans using the VR&E program are supported by their counselors to develop individualized plans following one of 5 tracks. The counselor is expected to be a subject matter expert on each of these issues. This seems unattainable for any one person. VES agrees with GAO's recommendation to conduct field research to identify and publish promising practices for field offices. Third, parity. With the passage of the Forever GI Bill, Congress removed the 15-year delimiting date and included restoration of entitlement to students due to school closures. We agree with our colleagues who have called for the removal of the 12-year delimiting date. We also believe those using VR&E should have the same restoration of entitlement as their peers using the post-9/11 GI Bill, should a school they are attending close. We also ask the committee to consider moving the program to only 1 subsistence rate instead of the 2 that currently exist. Doing so would reduce bureaucracy, eliminate confusion, and create better parity for those using the program. Finally, we believe this program needs more transparency and that the GI Bill comparison tool might be an optimal place to house information for both programs. I appreciate the committee's continued commitment on this program and look forward to answering any further questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Eng. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Many of you have raised the need for greater promotion of VR&E to increase awareness among eligible veterans. Question for each of you. Would you agree that these discussions about VR&E, the marketing effort, if you will, should take place during the Transition Assistance Program, or are there other venues that you would recommend as well? You can go in no.
Sir, I think both. I think that more information, any way we can get it out there. I think that in the TAP class, it's mentioned, but there's not a healthy discussion about it. As mentioned, the Forever GI Bill, you hear about it all over the place. You don't hear about it on social media the same way that Voc Rehab is. So I think that there's multiple ways you can spread the information.
I would agree with my colleague. I think TAP is a great venue for that. Social media can also assist a lot in trying to promote this program, but also looking at it before TAP is even in the mindset. So allowing service members to know what sort of programs are out there if they were to transition out is also an option.
Want to just keep going down the line?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would like to reemphasize what my colleagues have said and would actually expand on it. Not only should it be mentioned at TAP for the outgoing, the transitioning, the brand-new veteran, but also, you can really talk about expanding the VSOC program, the VSOCs, as on the other end of that with these veterans who are at the schools and are not able to be, around at least a vet center or an RO. Because currently, take California, for example, Mr. Chairman, I'll use that. Only 3 of the CSUs has a counselor at their school, and none of those are rural. All 3 of those CSUs, San Diego State, Cal State Long Beach, and Cal State Los Angeles, which all are within semi-reasonable access of a VARO. What about Cal State Bakersfield or Fresno State? These ones should have it as well, so that they could tell the students who are already there, hey, these are the benefits that are also available to you.
Also agree with my colleagues. Definitely, it needs to be more of a broader portion in TAP. But I'd also say that as the 12-year delimiting date is removed, we need to do more outreach for the older veterans. And that includes a large portion of our membership. A lot of them are older. Definitely, as was mentioned before, social media, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a huge platform, and I see veterans looking for job assistance every single day. But also possibly going into SCI centers, because our membership, the veterans that have to spend time in the SCI centers, they could benefit greatly from some of the programs for Voc Rehab.
I agree with all my colleagues here. I actually had highlighted VSOC counselors as well. I do think we need to increase that program, and they are a great way to disseminate some of the information to veterans who might be eligible for VR&E that aren't even aware of it, and as well as the partnerships with other veteran and military groups who can help disseminate similar information.
Thank you. Also, many of you alluded to the fact that it's not enough to help veterans just secure initial employment, but we really need to invest in ensuring they have lasting and fulfilling careers. Towards that end, I'd like to learn more about the suggestions to improve follow-up after veterans get placed in the job market. For no one in particular, anyone can weigh in on this. What information should be captured on follow-up, and how frequently should this occur?
So using our own program as a base, we actually follow up after employment at the 30, 60, 190, and 365. We don't consider it a successful employment unless they stay in that job for 1 year. At that time, we ask how satisfied they are. We know that satisfaction is incredibly important in making sure that there is successful retention within that job. So those are some of the suggestions we would recommend if you were to look at that.
Anyone else care to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so DAV does have a resolution where we look to support the extension of the period of employment services under Voc Rehab, because currently under Title 38, United States Code 3105, that allows veterans counseling and placement for the post-placement services for an additional period not to exceed 18 months, unless it was determined by the Secretary that it would need more. Now, we all want to see the veteran, succeed. And so we would, we do support the extension of those services. Absolutely.
Thank you. Out of time, but want to thank you all for your work and look forward to continuing to work with you to continue to improve this program for veterans. So with that, I'll turn it over to the ranking member, Mr. Bilirakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And this is for the panel. What is your view of the current management structure for VR&E? Do you believe that a regional review or some type of increased line authority focus is needed to improve performance? We can start from here, please.
Thank you, sir. I think one of the things that we should focus on is a little bit better reporting and oversight based on the regional offices. Having a national 1 to 125 client counselor ratio is great, but I think if it's reported at the local levels, that would help focus attention for management and oversight to see which regional offices were maybe above or below that.
Yes. Anyone else, please?
I would agree with my colleague with VFW. Currently, we're seeing a lot of changes, especially in the IT section with the VR&E office. We would definitely recommend that from leadership down to relay. We've heard some of the local counselors saying, you know, these are a lot of changes in a short amount of time. But with that, the reporting structure, you know, we would recommend just streamline that information down a little bit easier.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like to reiterate what my colleague at VFW said. We do support changing the reporting of the ratio to reflect the VA regional offices instead of a nationwide client-to-counselor ratio. And so that would help address the needs of specific offices and more directly help veterans.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I would say, in regards to PVA, our usage with VR&E is just so low. We just have few members that use the program that I'll take the question for the record because I just don't think that we have enough experience with the program to really comment on management structure.
Thank you.
I would say based off of the 2014 GAO report, and then having spoken with a number of school administrators who work with us on a daily basis, there does need to be more focus on the regional offices. There seems to be some offices that are doing exceptionally well and others that are really struggling. And to have some sort of accountability and transparency related to each office, I think would really help even VA, that proper, hold them accountable and kind of address those issues at a more localized level.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. Mr. Villanueva, yeah, I'm sorry, I messed up the name. Villanueva. Yeah, Villanueva, sorry. And Mr. Murray, can you please discuss your concerns about the drop in participation in the VR&E program and how this drop may have led to the 1 per 125 veteran to counselor ratio being achieved? I know that you talked about it a little bit, but elaborate a little more. We'll start with Mr. Villanueva, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and don't worry, it takes me some time to say it myself.
Well, I should know better. I apologize. But.
It's fine. No, we do have some concerns, and I know it was brought up at a prior hearing where the Deputy Undersecretary, she noted her concerns of it as well, because, you know, looking at the numbers that Department of Labor is putting out and that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is putting out, and how this same core group of veterans that utilizes VR&E, the Gulf War II era veterans that are roughly, you know, my age, late 20s, mid to late 30s, they're actually on the rise. However, the participation rates in the caseload is declining. Now, if the decline matches up with their now new 1 to 125 ratio, that's going to be a concern. You know, we want every veteran who can utilize this be able to utilize it and know about it. And we don't believe that this is a good trend, especially since according to the longitudinal studies and all the other cohorts, the usership and caseload was dramatically on the rise. And for it to now, you know, all of a sudden drop, not precipitously, but definitely have a drop, you know, this is something that we would want, you know, Congress to take a look at.
Thank you. Mr. Murray, what do you attribute the decline to?
So we're actually afraid that lack of attention for this program over years, attributed to lack of outreach, lack of knowledge about it, lack of the counselors having the ability to, you know, properly manage their caseload, you know, not hiring the additional employees from the 2016 public law that passed for 2 years, we think affected the program and the participation rates. As my colleague said, the rates were climbing steadily, and to see them drop, there needs to be a better explanation for the lack of attention over the years, and now hopefully that we're putting a spotlight on it, we're going to see those numbers start to rise again.
Very good. One last question, Mr. Chairman. Is that fine? I know I have a couple seconds here. Mr. Villanueva, what is your view of the telecounseling program? I think this is important. Do you believe that this new tool can provide greater accessibility to VR&E services to disabled veterans? I know Mr. Pappas asked the question as well. I think it's a key. I mean, in telehealth, and telemental health as well. But in this particular case, how effective would it be?
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. And I couldn't emphasize this more, that it is definitely a key, especially for reaching those who are in more rural communities. However, the pilot did show that there was 58% who chose not to do it, and the overriding reason, one of the two main reasons, was because they wanted that face-to-face with their counselor. So we need to ensure that that is still maintained for the veteran as well.
Good point. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I'd now like to recognize Ms. Rice for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ang, is that how you say it? Ang?
Ang.
Ang. Ms. Ang, in terms of the ratio, I think it's something that every single one of you has spoken about, and I think we really have to drill down and figure out how we figure out. I know, Mr. Villanueva, you had said that maybe the numbers should be driven by the region and the need and that as one of the driving factors. But Ms. Ang, you had said that the number should be closer to 85, I believe you said. So maybe you can talk, if you could talk about that, and then anyone else on the panel who has any thoughts about how we, I mean, because if we can't get to the bottom of this, what's the point of the program?
Correct. I based that off of the knowledge necessary to be able to support a military-connected student as they're going through the VR&E program. And having worked as an academic advisor within a higher ed institution, 85 was typically the number that would provide the best results for client or for student to counselor ratio. Academic advisors often provide similar, more focused guidelines related to workforce. You know, what career are you going to pursue after you finish this degree, and so then what is the right degree for you to pursue that program, or what's the right program of study for you to pursue that career trajectory. And based on that experience and other experience with working, I oversaw another program that worked with severely injured at Walter Reed as they were in the process of recovery to get them into top tier schools using their voc rehab. And we found that, again, the smaller client to counselor ratio provided a better return on investment and results. We believe VA has been conducting some research in that area, and I think that their numbers were close to that hasn't been published yet, and so we felt that was just an estimated guess, but probably a highly educated one.
Well, I mean, you talk, and rightly so, about the nature of how time intensive the interaction between each individual client and a counselor is. And I guess depending on the specific needs of the client, but also I think, you know, we should put a huge emphasis on training of the counselors as well, because the more trained and the better trained they are, the faster, without sacrificing, we can be more efficient without sacrificing the quality of the care that's given to the clients. Mr. Villanueva, if you want to talk more about what you had mentioned before about the geographic specificity, or in terms of the ratio?
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, I would love to talk about that. And one, like my colleagues had addressed, you know, some regional offices being, you know, more efficient than the others, and some, you know, giving out the service, and also the need, rural areas, of course, are not getting the same. However, I want to stress when it comes to the, you know, nailing down a number, the 1 to 125 or the 1 to 185. And as I stated in my oral testimony and also in our written testimony, One of the things that we're worried about is that becoming a metric that the VR&E is shooting for over the services provided to the veteran. If they are hiring all of these, counselors and then using them to replace service staff doing administrative tasks, then we're losing out. These disabled veterans are losing out on services and time that the counselors should be used and by giving it to them. So
That's a good point.
we would always want to be very careful on what it is and putting too much of an emphasis on that actual number. We will always look to see a greater, client to counselor ratio, that level to go down. However, the most important part is the services to these disabled veterans. And like I said, I was an example of what they can do for the individual veteran and having them achieve the success that they deserve.
So I just want to thank the chairman for holding this hearing with Mr. Streitberger, is that how you say your name? And all of you present, because you have the management who is trying to implement the program, and all of you who are hearing firsthand from the clients about the pros and cons of the program. And so I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting everyone in the same room, because this is where all of you have to agree that you're going to work for, and us too up here, are going to work toward having this program work not just for management, so that their numbers, and they get the credit for getting their numbers where they need to be, and all of you being advocates for your constituencies. This is really, really important that we're all here talking about this in the same room so that we can have accountability at the end of the day and ultimately service the clients who need it. So I just want to thank you all very much. You, Mr. Streitberger, for staying and hearing what everyone has to say, and all of you for participating. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Rice, and I have to also thank our great staff for making sure that everybody was able to be gathered here this morning. I'd now like to recognize Mr. Cunningham for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to each and every one of the witnesses who have come here to testify today, and for the service you all provide to your respective organizations and the service you provide to our veterans. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Mr. Frauenberger, it's good to see another South Carolinian here today. Welcome, D.C.
Thank you.
And you're from the district, right? You're from the Low Country?
That's correct. Born and raised in Charleston.
Okay, excellent, excellent.
doing.
Nice to have you here. And I don't have to tell you that, objectively speaking, we have the most beautiful district in the entire country, and it's partly that because we have such a high number of veterans living there as well, and it's the highest concentration of veterans in the entire state of South Carolina, which I'm sure you're aware of, right?
Correct, and I think that's a fact.
Right.
Most beautiful.
Right. I concur. And now that's part of the record. We can move on. I mean, we have a great VA facility there. I stopped by there on Sunday afternoon and saw some of the staff and people keeping that one of the best facilities. But, our VA also has some challenges and has difficulty recruiting and retaining employees. And in your testimony, you mentioned that VRCs often have difficulty finding federal employment opportunities for participants. So like your idea of a pilot program to streamline the interested veterans into open positions at the VA, could you provide a little bit more detail on how you would envision this program being designed?
Definitely, Congressman. I appreciate that question. As you know, the VA hospital in Charleston is quite large. There's also a good amount of schools around there. College of Charleston, Trident Tech, and the Medical University of South Carolina. It really comes down to a numbers game. You have 45,000 open vacancies at the VA, and you have about 115,000 people currently enrolled in the VR&E program. What we would like to see is a pilot program that if a counselor was to identify a nurse that was about to graduate or a police officer that's about to graduate and indicated that they were interested in working at the VA, they didn't have to jump through the same hoops, go on USA Jobs. They could say, hey, the left hand being the vocational rehabilitation counselor speaks to the right hand, which is the VA HR representative, saying, I've got a few individuals that might be interested. Can we fast track them or at least get their background checked and their applications through before they graduate?
And obviously, South Carolina being prime location to implement that with all the technical schools and the education facilities. Do you think that that pilot program could fall under one of the existing tracks under the vocational rehab program, or was this an entirely new one that would need to be established?
I think it could definitely fall into one of the existing tracks. For individuals going to school, I think this is a good option for them.
Okay. And so this essentially just puts people within that program with other schools or universities or organizations and has a constant open line of communication, I guess, when that recruiting process, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
I think the ultimate goal is, since VA is investing in these veterans, to try and find meaningful employment, and at the same time, while they're looking for qualified veterans to fill these open positions, there should definitely be some communication there.
I appreciate your testimony, appreciate your time in coming here today, as with the rest of you all, and I would yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham, and you're always welcome to visit California's 49th District, which includes La Jolla, the beautiful VA at La Jolla. Our guests from the Low Country certainly welcome as well, as is everyone else. I think we've got the second most veterans in the United States, but according to the VA, we'll have San Diego Region will soon have the most. But no doubt Mr. Cunningham, we're very fortunate, both of us, to represent beautiful coastal districts. If there are no further questions, I want to echo the comments of many of my colleagues. We're truly grateful to you for the work that you do on behalf of our veterans and for the collaborative nature of this morning's hearing. We look forward to hearing from each of you in the weeks and months ahead about the ongoing collaboration around VR&E. And I'd like to thank the ranking member as well, and all of the members who asked excellent questions. All members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include additional materials. Again, I thank everyone for coming, and without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned.